Hello, everyone who's coming into the room right now. Thanks for making the time to join us this evening. My name is Michael. I'm the events coordinator and publicist at Annie Bloom's Books. For those of you who aren't familiar with the store, we have two more people to admit already. For those of you who aren't familiar with Annie Bloom's, we are in Portland, Oregon in Multnomah Village. We've been around for 42 years now, and we are still going strong despite everything that's going on in the world. Our store is open now to limited browsing. It's a recent development. Just a few customers at a time, and it's first come, first serve. So you just show up at the door, see if you can get in, masking and social distancing and all that required, of course. We're open on weekdays from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and weekends from 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. If you're not coming to browse in the store, you can still come up to the front and pick up a book or ask a question, buy a book at the front door. You can also email, phone. You can shop at annieblooms.com day or night, of course. Place orders online for delivery, pickup, to be mailed to you. We have a couple of different shipping options, all different kinds of ways you can get a variety of books, including Utah, a novel. I'll put that link here in the chat for you so you can zip right over there and buy it right now or at any time. All right, we have some other great events that are coming up in the rest of the month here. It's National Poetry Month, so we have a poetry reading this Friday. John Brem will be reading from his new book, The Dharma of Poetry, which is about poetry and also includes, I think, some famous poems in there that he's going to be reading from and talking about poetry. The next week, Tuesday, a week from today, on April 27th, Portland author Jacqueline Keeler is reading from her new book, Standoff, Standing Rock, the Bundy Movement, and the American Story of Sacred Lands. And a couple days after that, on Thursday the 29th, we have Jutta Donath, whose memoir is Refugee, The Journey of an East German Woman. Cool stuff. Tonight, we are delighted to be hosting Levi Rogers for the live stream launch of his debut novel, Utah! Exclamation mark. I love that about it. You can order that book for that link right there. We really appreciate it. Order for yourself and for your friends and your family. More people coming in, yay, hello. After Levi reads, there's gonna be a Q&A session. You can feel free to type questions into the chat and I'll read those, or you can ask directly during the Q&A portion if you like. However you're most comfortable is fine. Let me tell you about Utah, a novel. Fleeing from ever-present wildfires and the threat of the Yellowstone supervolcano erupting, Lee, Becca, and their daughter Annalise embark on a road trip through the state of Utah to a wedding in Zion National Park. Let's admit a couple more people here before we continue. Welcome, new folks. I'm telling you about Utah, a novel. They're going to a wedding in Zion National Park. Set in the not too distant future, Utah is a novel about climate change and the intricacies of relationships between family, partners, religious structures, nature, and the American West. Featuring a litany of intriguing Utah residents, including ex and current Mormons, doomsday preppers, military vets, Presbyterian ministers, and Colombian housewives. These characters eventually find their paths crossing in violence, disaster, and friendship. Through desert islands, climbing gyms, beer bars, suburbia, mountains, coffee shops, long drives, and mass shootings, Utah seeks to show the true diversity, beauty, and yes, sometimes peculiar aspects of one of the most misunderstood states. It's a novel about the smoldering darkness beneath the surface of our individual selves and society, and what happens when we refuse to acknowledge our past transgressions. Utah is a slow burn of a novel that ends with an explosive finish, an exclamation mark of a finish, I would imagine. Let me tell you about Levi Rogers, the author of this book. He has an MFA from Antioch University, Los Angeles, and a bachelor's of English from the University of Utah. In July, and I'm saying Utah every time with an exclamation, Utah! In July of 2018, Rogers attended the Tin House Summer Workshop and is currently working with the new broadside literary journal, Meow Meow Pow Pow, as a blog editor. He's published essays, poetry, and reviews in Entropy, Sojourners, Lunch Ticket, Drunk Monkeys, Acacia Books, Hoot, Daily Coffee News, and Devour Magazine, amongst others. He owns and runs a coffee roasting company, La Barba Coffee, in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he lived for the last 8 years before moving to Portland, Oregon. He lives with his wife, Kat, his daughter, Evangeline, and a new child, his dog Amelie, and 2 cats, Chicken and Waffles. Utah, a novel, is his first book. He is also working on a book about faith, depression, and belonging called All We Can Hope For in This Dark and Beautiful World, Memoirs on Belonging. Everyone, welcome Levi Rogers.
Oh, thank you, everyone. It's good to see everyone. Your names and some of your faces. Feel free to show yourselves if you want to. I just want to thank Michael and Annie Bloom's Books for having me. It's a true pleasure to be able to do something like this, in spite of everything going on. Oh, look, so many people. Hi, Mari, Bernadette, sister, Dominic, Lisa. Thank you all so much. It means a lot to me. My wife, too. So yeah, this will be pretty informal. I'm just going to read a little bit, maybe talk a little bit about the book, and then we can do some questions and answers. And pour yourself a drink if you want, or a tea, or some. Well, it's a little late for coffee, but I'm still drinking it. And we'll have a good time. So yeah, as Michael mentioned, it was let's see. So I grew up in Colorado, and then went out to Portland, did some studied at Portland State for a little bit, and then I found myself in Utah for reasons which will be discussed in my memoir for about 8 years. And I just thought it was a very interesting place, and something that people would almost kind of make jokes about. Like every time I would go back to Colorado or Oregon, people would be like, "Hey, how's Utah? How many wives you got now?" Like those kinds of things. And like it was kind of funny at first, but I was like, there's a lot more to this place than just what you'd think. And so I kind of wanted to showcase that, and then yeah, and then for other reasons too, which I'll probably talk about later. But anyways, I'm going to read. So I thought I would take you guys on, since we can't travel. I will take you through some scenic sites of Utah, and you can pretend that you are traveling to Utah. So I'll read the first chapter and then just a couple selections of some cool places. Chapter 1, Dutch Oven. Saturday. Adios, America. Logan, Utah. Smoke and ash stung Becca's nostrils when she entered the outside world. The air smelled of campfire and pine as a yellow haze smothered the streets in every direction. Wildfires. From Montana and Idaho to Oregon, Colorado, Washington, and of course, California. The entire West was on fire. White smoke from Baja to British Columbia, San Francisco to Salt Lake. It was Labor Day weekend, and the fires in the US now burned earlier, longer, and hotter. The rains came less frequently. The temperatures refused to cool, even at night. You could feel the air, dry, hot, and stagnant, ready to burst. Becca's eyes began to water as she looked up at the sun. The yellow star was now the color of pink lemonade. "Lee, we need to go," Becca shouted inside as she opened the front door with her daughter, Annalise, in the car seat. "Now!" A tiny scream issued from underneath the blanket. "Shh," Becca whispered. "I know. It'll be okay." Would it, though? Becca shut the front door behind her and rushed down the stairs to get the baby in the car and out of the smoke. Their small neighborhood of Logan, Utah was still asleep. Nothing moved besides the birds. No cars, no humans, no wind. Just smoke and ash. The smell of hot doom in the atmosphere. Did these people not see? Did they not hear? It was a level 2 evacuation, meaning be packed and ready to go at a moment's notice, yet not quite a level 3 evacuation, i.e., go now. The fire was still a few miles away, yet Becca didn't want to be a story on KSL News later. One of a mom with a charred baby trapped in a car off the side of a road who had waited too long to leave. They were evacuating south to stay with family, in Salt Lake and beyond. Becca buckled Annalise inside the car and ran back inside. In a way, Becca thought of these wildfires as a strange mercy. She didn't know whether she could handle being a mother, and she saw no way out. She and Lee were trying to make it work. They'd even gotten married. but the question of whether they were going to make it work was still undecided. Becca wanted to be a good mother more than anything in the world, yet she had a sick feeling in her stomach that she never would. She was tired of being alone with an infant and only too happy to go someplace where she would have help. She wanted an out. Lee, what? Are you listening to me? Becca was standing in the doorway to the basement now, looking down. You never listen, Becca continued. You're always lost in your head. Lee began to roll his eyes as he leapt up the stairs with some instant meals in their camping stove. And don't roll your eyes at me. It's the number one sign of divorce, she said. He greeted her, as if to apologize, with a small kiss on her cheek. Well, you rolled your eyes back there at me earlier in the kitchen, you know. Becca rolled her eyes at him again. Did we get everything? I hope so. Lee grabbed the rest of their supplies in the kitchen, the smell of freshly brewed coffee permeating their duplex. Becca grabbed their travel mugs and left the Chemex sitting by the sink. The two of them walked outside, and Lee locked the front door of their tiny duplex behind them. Becca, sarcastically thinking that the imminent destruction of the planet via volcano or earthquake or wildfire seemed more pleasant to her than marriage or motherhood. But that's also why she'd married Lee, of course, their shared sense of dark humor, and Annalise. Of course. They walked briskly down the stairs. Did you get the bottles? Becca asked him. Yes. Did you get the diaper bag? Yes. Denali? She's in the car. Annalise? I just put her in. See, said Lee, smiling, trying to ease the tension because he was a people pleaser by nature. We're killing this parenting thing. At least we haven't killed each other yet, said Becca. Or ourselves, said Lee. Becca and Lee smiled at each other as they opened a car door, the only moment of considerate pause for each other in their whole morning. Becca looked up into the sky. Ash floated to the ground like snow. It fell atop the cars and driveways in the fresh white sprinkle of disappearing forests. Lee loaded the rest of their supplies into the top of their old green Outback, a Yellowstone National Park, and Keep Tahoe blue stickers adorning the side. Becca raced around the front of the car. Lee buckled his seatbelt and put the car in drive. The pack and play, Becca shouted, and put the car in drive. It was still in the porch. Lee returned to park. I'll get it, he sighed, opening his door, but Becca was already out the car. She ran back up the stairs, grabbed the pack and play, ran back down, opened up the hatch, and shoved the pack and play inside, slamming the hatch shut. The loud noise made Annalise flinch. Lee raised an eyebrow at Becca as she returned to the passenger door, and then he shut his door, gently, as if to show her how one was supposed to shut the doors of a car with a tiny baby. Gently. Oh, please, she said to Lee. She was going to cry either way. She'd been fussy all morning. They sped off down the road, their car haphazardly packed with camping gear, suitcases, laptops, journals, pictures, passports, wallets, birth certificates, insurance information, toiletries, tote bags, diapers and wipes, and everything else they considered valuable, which, actually, wasn't much. Becca wondered if they'd ever see their tiny duplex again. She didn't care, really. It was a rental anyways. Besides, the world was burning. Adios, America. All right. Now, let's travel to the Great Salt Lake. So, this passage is about the Great Salt Lake. At the next exit, Lee took the road west towards Syracuse and Antelope Island. They drove through rural suburbs and some farmland before reaching the park gate. They paid the attendant $10 in the brown Smokey the Bear type hut and proceeded to drive over the causeway, a lone stretch of asphalt that stretched 8 or so miles from the mainland to the island, the wind whipping the dust all around them. The lake, or lack of it, stretched out on either side of them, white and blue. Spots of dried up sand were covered in white salt deposits, fossils of a time when water had once covered the area but since retreated, another casualty of warming temperatures. The alkaline island itself had a small range of mountains down the center. From a distance, it looked like a sharp ridge or a dinosaur spine. Sage and yellow grass covered the hillsides. The entire island had a beautiful American frontier landscape swirl of blue and yellow, white and brown. On the island side of the causeway, there was a small, mostly deserted marina where a few people would take boats out on the water. As they drove closer, they noticed the grimy beach. Brine, shrimp, and flies littered the sand, feasting on algae and the carcasses of dead birds. The skeletons of boats decayed on the dry sand. Yet, despite all this on the beach, it was a pretty lake if you didn't look too closely. They saw a sign for visitor center up ahead, but passed by it and headed south down the black road in front of them. Lee asked Becca if she wanted to go to the beach, but all Becca had to do was raise her eyebrows for Lee to know the answer. The entire island was beautiful in the austere, desolate way that much of southern and western Utah was. Up north, in Cache Valley, between Ogden and Logan, Utah was all wide meadows, wild flowers, and gently sloping mountains. West and south of Salt Lake in Utah County, however, the state began to take on its Wild West open range feel before eventually bleeding into the redlands, arches, hoodoos, and stone formations it was so well known for. National parks and monuments like Canyonlands, Moab, Arches, Capitol Reef, the San Rafael Swell, and Zion, making up the southern portion of the state. But here, just west of Salt Lake, was a mix of both. You could see the pine-filled Wasatch Mountains and the city of Salt Lake in the distance. But the island had few fauna and was instead filled with rocks and brown dirt and crags. All around the edges of the lake were the borders of white and red salt from evaporated water that once hugged the buoyant lake, whose water you could float in while barely lifting a head, barely lifting a muscle to keep you afloat. They drove for 15 minutes before they saw the first buffalo. Look, shouted Becca. Denali barked. It was a large, hairy beast with docile eyes off to the right of the road. The creature chewed grass and looked up briefly to stare at them through the window. It was like being at Yellowstone National Park, though the buffalo here is smaller and more predictable, yet still wild. Lee pulled over at a safe distance and took a picture on her phone. And Becca took a picture on her phone. More buffalo popped up as they continued driving, and, to Lee's surprise, there were even some antelope or pronghorn, their bent antlers protruding out of their white and brown bodies, maleficent-like. I have to pee, said Becca after a while, and at that moment, Annalise woke up and started crying. Oh, baby girl, it's okay, said Lee, turning around in the faded gray passenger seat. I think her pacifier's behind you, Lee said. Becca reached in the diaper bag behind the passenger seat and pulled out a bottle and a pacifier. She tried the pacifier first. It seemed to work. They turned around and drove back to park at the visitors center. Masks on, Becca said, and they both put their purple painter respirators on. So that's a section where they go visit a place called Antelope Island, which is this really weird island in the middle of the Salt Lake that has buffalo and antelope on it. And it's only like 30 minutes outside of Salt Lake City. And it's just kind of a strange, little island that I think is really interesting. And so, kind of throughout the book, they'll go and kind of, they kind of start north in the state and they'll kind of travel down, kind of I-5 and then eventually end up at Zion National Park, which is at the very bottom, and kind of visit all these places in Utah along the way. And so it's in a lot of ways a road trip novel in many ways, even though those are both kind of good and bad, right? Because it's you're on a journey somewhere, but oftentimes on a road trip it can be a little meandering sometimes, and you're never really sure. A little slower sometimes than you expect. So, all right, I just have two more, and then we'll do some questions. All right, so this is after this, they kind of have to go through, they see some family in Salt Lake. And right now I'm just reading from the two main characters, which are Lee and Becca. There's actually 5 different characters in here that it shifts the point of view from each of their perspectives. But Lee and Becca kind of anchor the scenes. And so I don't want to confuse you guys too much by reading 5 different characters sections. And that really comes from me just wanting to show like as many different kind of perspectives as possible in the book. And so it's a little tricky, right? Because you don't want to write too much from outside your own experience in some ways, but I did want to showcase like a lot of different people that were not just like me. And there's my daughter. Hi, Evangeline. What do you got? Love you. Okay, so this is when they're finally headed south to the desert. South, Bryan's Head, Panguitch, Utah. Finally, they were going somewhere, south, to the desert. Lee was driving, bobbing his head with a smile while the music poured through the speakers. He couldn't remember the last time he had been this excited. Becca sat next to him, sunglasses on, smiling in a way he hadn't seen in weeks. Away. They were finally away. They had visited all their family and were now gone. They had a day and a half to camp around Zion before they would need to clean up and shower for the wedding Saturday night. That is, if the volcano didn't go off, of course. The Yellowstone caldera had been upgraded from yellow to orange. Orange, i.e., the volcano was exhibiting heightened or escalating unrest with increased potential of eruption, time frame uncertain, or eruption is underway with no or minor volcanic ash emissions. Who knew what was going to happen after the wedding? But for now, they were here, driving with endless road and horizon and desert landscape. Lee felt as he always did whenever he made it this far out and began to lapse into his former traveling self. How could he go back to society, with its confines and pressures and rigidity? As Lee drove alongside the sage and lavender, the canyons and mountains, the dry yellow grass, he thought of Utah as it existed before it had been settled. When members of the Ute, Paiute, Goshute, and Navajo tribes had called it home and wandered freely around the open land, everyone's land, before it was claimed by the followers of Brigham Young and the LDS Church, and then, of course, by the federal government of the United States of America. Utah itself was named after the Ute Indian tribe. The U.S. government had persecuted the Mormons, driving them from their original home in Missouri, and though the followers of Joseph Smith had gone as far as Utah, arguably the middle of nowhere in the West at the time, the government only granted statehood to Utah once the church had received a prophetic revelation that it was no longer to practice polygamy and promised that it was done with all that. And hence, the state of Utah and the home of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints began. In some ways, Lee almost felt bad for the Mormons. After all, the followers of Joseph Smith had gone as far away from civilization as they could at the time and merely wanted to live out their religion in peace. But the government had refused them this basic right. What if they had been able to create the state of Deseret as they had proposed to the US government in 1849? The Zion or Utopia LDS members had envisioned, stretching from the southwestern region up through Idaho. A state where virtually no alcohol or coffee existed, and the Mormon religion was equal to that of the state. No, it would never have been allowed. Just like the US had claimed the same Indian territory for itself, neither would it grant authority to the followers of Joseph Smith. Lee took a sip of coffee and passed the exit for Spanish Fort Canyon. White windmills in the distance. Almost 2 years ago, it seemed like decades ago now, when he and Becca had first started dating, they traversed the United States together for 3 weeks, hitchhiking and taking trains. Old school. They wanted to be nomads, survivalists, anarcho-primitivists, those who lived off the land through their own sweat, unchained to employers, governments, and corporations. They'd both tried to live in direct opposition to whatever modern technological religious life seemed to demand from them. Yet Lee decided he was done being a good Mormon. He'd skipped his mission, but he'd married Mandy as a sort of compromise. Lee knew deep down he would have grown tired of this lifestyle, years on the road touring with bands or by himself. He could feel the desire for stability and perhaps even a home and a family start to take place. So it's a little intro to some of the stuff of Utah. All right, last one. And this one they've camped the night before, and then they're just about to enter Zion National Park for a wedding of one of Lee's cousins that they're going to. And no one's sure. There's kind of some mystery surrounding the wedding. Kind of this is where all the characters sort of converge, is in Zion National Park down in Utah. It's a great place if you've never been. Almost too crowded now. So this one's called Zion, finally. Zion National Park, Utah. Annalise woke them in the dark. Beck was able to comfort her for an hour or so, neither quite awake nor asleep, so tired, before the blue and yellow of the morning light flooded the tent and woke them all up in synchronicity. Lee fed Annalise from the bottle, while Becca unzipped the tent and headed to the car where she took out the stove and placed it upon the picnic table. She unfolded the top of the stove, turned the gas on, lit the burner, and filled the hot water kettle, placed it on the grill, and waited for it to heat so she could make an AeroPress. She stared at the landscape around her, the colorful shedding aspen trees, the small hills of green rolling in the distance, pinyon and juniper trees, her breath still visible in the air, the white wisps of cloud streaking across the sky, and felt utterly at peace. All anxieties and horrors of last night's thoughts and dreams far gone. Well, almost. She still couldn't believe it. What Lee had done. She rubbed her eyes beneath her thick framed glasses and yawned. She remembered the last time they had gone camping and Lee had made a similar observation. This is happiness, he said, looking out at the woods in the morning while they made coffee. The way we are supposed to live. She heard the sound of the tent zipper, and Lee came rushing out of the tent, holding Annalise, his eyes in panic. Sorry, can you hold her for a second? I gotta poop, and it can't wait. Becca took Annalise and watched as Lee grabbed a small poop shovel from the back of their car along with a roll of teepee and shuffled out into the woods. Normally, she would have laughed, but not this morning. After the coffee and oatmeal was made, Annalise fed and her diaper changed after an explosive blowout of chunky yellow-brown poop that smeared over her pajamas and the inside of the car. Yet, still looking extra cute this morning for some reason. The sleeping bags stuffed inside their rucksacks, the tent dismantled and folded up, the campground bathrooms used, the car loaded, fantasies and acts of betrayal discussed in the night. The three of them buckled in and set off, finally, in tense silence, to Zion. God, camping with a baby was a lot of work. The morning sun broke bright and clear over the black asphalt. Lee drove, Becca sat shotgun. Lee took a sip of his coffee and accidentally rumbled over the rumble strips on the right side of the road. He corrected, Becca raising her eyebrows at him, and he re-gripped the steering wheel firmly. Man. Oh, sorry. They didn't look at each other. They didn't smile, but the short conversation softened both of them. So far, the scenery was nothing spectacular. Brown dirt, scrub oak, more small juniper trees and pinyon, rocky hills. But that was how these places were, miles of nothing, and then bam! The sudden appearance of majestic cliffs or arches or mountains. They turned right on State Highway 89 and then left on Route 9. Farther west and south of them lay the Grand Staircase and Bears Ears National Monuments. Federal land that had been downsized some years ago and had been in endless litigation ever since. Lawsuits trading hands from native tribes to oil and gas companies, environmental groups, and so on, while the land sat mostly empty, which was either good or bad, depending on one's philosophy. Soon, smooth waves of red rock dotted the landscape in front of Becca. The freshly paved road was black and glistening and marked on either side by bright white lines, a yellow dotted center. The road began to twist and turn to navigate the jutting geographical landscape. The red and white rocks around them were like small desert hobbit holes, round and smooth, stratified lines of erosion etched over their surface like the fossilized wakes of a rattlesnake. The rocks soon grew in size and came to dominate the hills around them. Reddish brown sand covered the road. 100 yards ahead, they could see it through the black shadow of the tunnel. Their green Subaru entered the darkness and Lee turned on the lights. But it was not all black. A quick bend in the road and there was once again light. Short tunnel, Becca thought. But the tunnel continued. To her right, windows appeared, not windows made of glass, but rectangles cut out of the sidewall of the sandstone itself, giving one a glimpse into a valley of red and green below them. This is called the Zion Mount Carmel Tunnel, Lee said. He was clearly happy to see how shocked she was. I forgot you've never been to Zion before. Aren't these windows cool? Light now mixed with darkness and kaleidoscoped across the windshield. Soon, they emerged from the tunnel and Becca gasped. They were shooting left alongside a wide and steep valley that overtook the entirety of their vision. An immense, deep, wide, green, fertile valley like something out of Land Before Time or Mesopotamia stretched out before them, like the Garden of Eden. In the distance, Becca could see the towers and ridges of red rock standing guard over the great green valley. Zion. That's called the Sentinel, said Lee, returning to the narration of the trip. Never in her life had Becca had her breath physically taken away by scenery, or anything really. She gasped again. The tunnel was such an extreme demarcation between the beautiful and the truly beautiful, the southwestern desert of Utah versus Zion. that it felt like she had just been transported into another world. This valley in front of her was unlike the other desert features of Moab or Canyonlands or Bryce or Arches. Here, in this strip of green and orange and red in the middle of nowhere, it was an oasis, a small pocket of land secretly hidden inside a harsh landscape of the dry, desolate, and cracked earth. Here, there was water overflowing and lush greenery abounded. Zion. The road itself turned reddish brown and switched back down the hill in a seemingly never ending pattern of Z's and S's. More of the same oak brown and bright green of juniper bushes, ponderosa pines, and scrub oak alongside them. The base of the valley lay below, a small blue river coursing through the center of it. The high mid morning sun shone bright and clear. You know, Lee continued, originally they named this Mukuntuweap National Monument, but the director of the National Park Service changed the name in 1918 to what the Mormons called it when they first settled the land in 1847, Zion. It was, how did my dad put it back when I was a kid, done for ethnocentric reasons, which, basically means that they thought more white people would go to the park if the name was easier to pronounce. Ha, figures, Becca said, still in shock at the scenery. And then, how do you know all this? Lee shrugged. My dad. They stopped in Springdale to get gas, a refill on coffee, and use the bathroom. The traffic now stretched thick all around them, and the illusion of wilderness gave way to a Disneyland-like euphoria and claustrophobia. But they eventually found the way to what appeared to be the main parking lot, parked, and grabbed a multi-folded brochure of the park from a ranger station. It looked like they needed to take a bus through the main canyon of Zion because it was so narrow. Since the park was now one of the most crowded national parks in the country, no cars were allowed in the canyon. Zion was, in fact, officially now, one of the most visited national parks in America, surpassing even Yellowstone and Yosemite, which also meant that it was a clusterfuck. All right, I'll stop there. So those are just a few. Hopefully you, get to see some scenic descriptions of Utah. And let's do some questions. We'll just hang out. It'll be fun.
Feel free to post them in the chat if you want me to read them, or you can pop on here and ask Levi.
I guess I'll say too. So I wrote this book. The first reason was describe Utah. But there's also there's sort of this volcano in the background of the story, and I kind of meant it. It's a very big thing, and almost too big. And at the time, I kind of wanted to be sort of like a metaphor for this big thing like climate change that we all know is coming, but that we're kind of apathetic about, and we don't really do anything about it. And I felt it was also a good metaphor for the sort of simmering tensions underneath society in the U.S. As I saw it the last, I don't know, a long time, but especially heightened in the last 5 or 6 years. But it was kind of funny. I mean, not really funny. It's actually sad. But that it felt like I was just like, man, something's got to give. Like in, not to get too political, but like, so like, there's so much tension going on. There's so much stuff that like it just felt like all this stuff is simmering. That something was going to explode, and then in a lot of ways, it did in 2020. Like this sort of protests and this sort of response to the pandemic or lack of response, and to something so big and cataclysmic that you would think people would kind of get it together, but that didn't happen. And all these tensions with protests and with sort of race in the US too, like that all kind of like it all kind of happened in 2020. And so it's kind of funny because that's kind of what one of the things I was writing about was just like trying to like use a way through fiction to describe kind of what was happening. But anyways,
we do have some questions in the chat. Dominique Lang wants to know, what was it like writing 5 different character perspectives?
Good question, Dominic. It was really it was good. It was a good experience for me because I had spent many years writing creative nonfiction and stuff that was really close to me, and so I was really trying to get out of myself and um, write something from someone else's perspective. Um, I would say I would say Lee and Becca are very similar to my perspective and worldview in many ways, but then the other characters are much different, and so um, there's one funny story I put is that I was gonna have so in the story there's which is kind of a thing that happens in Utah, but there's one of the characters' name is Emily or Amelia, and she's from Colombia, and she's basically a Mormon housewife. And the way I came up with that is that I was gonna have because I wanted to tell this story mostly from to have women's perspectives as well. And I was going to Colombia for a coffee trip, and in the immigration line, there's these two white guys behind me, and they start talking, and the guy's like, "What are you doing?" And then like, "What are you doing down here?" He's like, "Oh, I'm going to visit my wife's family." The other guy's like, "Oh, me too. Like, I'm gonna go visit my wife's family." And there's also a big presence of the LDS Church in South America, and so I just thought it was kind of an interesting thing that it's like things like that that I'm like, what would it be like to be like, I mean, I don't know if they were LDS, but there are a lot of people from South America in Utah. But anyways, it was just kind of funny because it's like, what would it be like to be right, kind of big leap, uh, to be sort of a Mormon housewife in Utah. Um, so that's one, and then there's another character that is a little intense, has a lot of rage, and is kind of based on a little bit like profile of some of these sort of like mass shooters that have come out. And it's that one was my family's here. There was a shooting at my high school. I wasn't there, but I was a freshman in college, and there was a guy that came, and I won't tell the whole story, but I grew up in Colorado too, and so that stuff has always been there. And so it's kind of like looking at that and being like, and that was a tricky one too, because I didn't want to go too far. I don't really want to imagine to go too far down that rabbit hole of, who is like really getting to someone's head like that, because I don't think you can, and I don't think it'd be good. But just sort of, yeah. I mean, that was a tough one too. That was definitely the toughest one of the novel. But yeah, those are just a couple things.
All right, Bernadette Murphy. We'll get to you soon, Aaron. Keep your yellow hand up. Bernadette Murphy wants to know, great reading, Levi. What's your favorite element of Utah? I'm not sure whether she means the novel or the state, but you can answer however you like, I suppose.
Would you mean the novel or the state, Bernadette?
Either one.
um, my favorite element of the state, and one of the reasons that drew me, is how close the mountains are. The mountains like make Salt Lake for me, and so it's like 45 minutes from your house to the parking lot of a ski resort if you live in Salt Lake, or closer, depending where you live. And then my favorite element of the book was, I guess, just trying to create this sort of atmosphere. I would say it's sort of an atmospheric novel in that it's a little. The plot isn't, necessarily anything crazy, but that just trying to create this. I enjoy creating this sort of feel for what it's like to be in a place. So.
Which I think you kind of answered this earlier when you're talking about the different characters, but which character do you most identify with? Tobaijah Rogers wants to know.
Tobaijah. Let's see. Yeah, that would basically be Lee and Becca. There is, though, I thought about this because everyone always asks it if you write fiction, like what is like autobiographical, or what is to identify with. And I think for me, the truth is that like there's a little bit of each character like in me, or that a part of me is in each of the characters, because I feel like that's the only way I know how to, like, at this stage in my life, that's the only way I know how to like feel some sort of connection to them. So.
All right, I think Erin raised her hand before Marie wrote her. So we'll answer Aaron's question here in the chat, which is, I assume, corresponding to her yellow hand question. If they were going to make the novel into a movie or series, who would you want to direct and who might you want to cast in it?
Ooh, good question. I've actually thought about this, which is terrible because it's like so vain. Like obviously they're gonna make the book into a movie. um, I think it would be a good fit for Taylor Sheridan, he wrote Sicario, and he's the director of Hell or High Water and also this TV series called Yellowstone. And he has a new one coming out with Angelina Jolie on HBO about wildfires in Montana. And so I think it would be right up his alley.
Sounds like it. Cool. And then Marie wants to know, how did the journey of writing the book change or impact you?
Good question, Mari.
Sorry.
I think it was, personally, I was going through some stuff with marriage and fatherhood that I was, was helped me get out on the page, kind of on a personal level. And then I think in some ways this was all a big like experiment to see if I could write a novel. And so I think it was a big learning process for me just the whole way through on literally everything, like how to develop characters, how to do plots, because I said I was mostly working on memoir essay stuff. And so that really changed. So I feel like the writing process changed a lot for me. And in the process of publishing the book and doing a lot of it myself, just figuring out what people like and what people didn't like. And I'm really excited, honestly, now just to hear, get criticism, good or bad. Just because I don't know, it's like, what do people, you go to a lot of workshops when you're a writer, and it's like, well, this working, this is working, this working, but no one gets to see like the whole thing. Although Bernadette did, and she wrote me a great blurb, so thank you. And so it's cool to see, like, sort of the overall impact of what you wrote and kind of what's working or what doesn't working for like the readers, the sort of general public readers themselves, not just like the writers who you're trying to impress. And so yeah, so I'd say my writing career, and then just thinking through, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of like relationships in it. In some ways it's like, I think it's in some ways because I wrote 5 characters and I think I tried to do a lot in this book, and it's a little too much sometimes. Um and so in some ways I think I tried to take on too much as far as like, but I was really wanted to write about relationships and um like very small relationship details that happen between couples, but then also big things like volcanoes, and then also like the state. And so in some ways it's a little too many mixed genres competing with each other. But whatever. I tried it, and so yeah.
I like that aspect of it from what I was listening to, that you were reading. I thought that was a really nice mix. So hopefully people will appreciate that. Break those rules. Derek wants to know, what books or authors inspired you most? And actually, that was asked by his wife, Madeline.
Nice. I would say so a lot of memoirs, and then a lot of memoirs. Like Lydia Yuknovich is one of my favorite writers. She just had a book of short stories come out. She's based here in Portland as well. I'm really into I kind of started my journey was kind of like really into like Dave Eggers and David Foster Wallace at first, and then it kind of, went to like more kind of classic stuff that I would read in school, by people. And then now I've tried to read and consume a lot of contemporary stuff just to know the market. And I really enjoy I just found Ishiguro. Kazuo Ishiguro, and I really like his novels. I think they're really great. And then I really like any sort of yeah, I guess it is kind of, I feel weird calling my book a Western, but I guess it is like sort of neo-Western stuff, like Cormac McCarthy, kind of stuff that's going on. And then I really like George Saunders for his short stories, and he's just so funny. I mean, you can't get enough. Um, and let's see, it's one of those things I read all the time, but
That's a good list.
yeah, those are some.
Terry Rogers wants to know which female character in your book changes the most.
That's a good question. Sorry, I don't know why I'm saying that. That's a good question. I would say, there's not a lot of change, but you do need change in all of your characters, right? And so you just need, like, someone once told me that you just need someone, they start at one point and then by the end of the book, they just need to be at least one step over here, right? Just so something has to happen for them to be a little different. And so I would say just Becca, because she makes, she kind of is a bigger character, makes the most progress, as far as, all it really is that basically, she, at first she's unsure about being a mother, and then by the end she's like, let's do this, I'm in, like, let's go. That's kind of the change that happens, internal change within her. It's small, it's not like a big, it's not nothing huge.
It sounds big.
But that's it, yeah.
Welcome, Ryan and Matt. If you have any questions, we're in the Q&A portion. You missed the reading, so you have no idea what you're asking about. But...
Oh, welcome, guys.
And feel free to type it in the chat too if you like, and I can ask those questions there. And I just want to make sure, Aaron, that you got your question answered. Oh, we have one from Mari. Go for it.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to lower my hand. So if it's okay, I'm not going to ask a question, but I'm going to share a comment, just like how I experienced the reading. And I really feel like you did take us there. It was so beautiful. And I feel like part of our future is like feeling connected to nature and the landscape and feeling that relationship. And so I thought that was really beautiful. I really felt like even in just that bit of time, I had a more complex understanding of Utah. So I'm looking forward to reading the book. And there was one moment when, and I'm not going to remember it correctly, but there's one part where you say something like, what was it, like something in betrayal and like packing up the camping gear or something like that, like that. And I kind of just felt like my jaw dropped a little bit, because it seemed like a real capturing of life, where you just kind of like going through the day-to-day, and then these like profound, really serious things that are interwoven in just like the day-to-day, or like on a road trip. So bravo, Levi. I'm looking forward to reading the book.
Thank you. That's really nice.
I'm a rookie, so I don't know how to raise my hand. So I don't know if I could ask a question. I had a question for Levi too.
Go for it.
It's more of a general question. When and where did you have time to write this book? And where did you hide from Evangeline? Do you have a secret basement? Do you have a cabin somewhere?
I know, it's funny, like, I've actually not, I think because I've always been working or in school, so I've never had like lots of time just to like, or I'm a little lazy and want to take a nap, just to like block out an afternoon. So I feel like for me, it's honestly, I write like an hour at a time. And so I would do it like mostly, it's hard to remember how I'd write before, but lately it's just like basically 8:30 to 9:30 at night. Like once the kids in bed, or throughout the day, like when I have something really big. My wife gets mad at me for this. Like I'll pull out my computer and just be typing, like no matter what's happening around me, like it doesn't matter. Like I'm just, if I get something, I'm just zoned in. And so I can just be sitting on the couch watching TV or hanging out, and then, or with like not watching TV, but TV in the background, and then just be, you know, hyper focused. And so, yeah, it's tough though. A lot of times I feel like it's not the writing, but it's more when I need the like very clear headed, like, all right, how do I structure this? Like that I feel like my mind gets a little mushy with kids or just in general. I'm like, you know, it's like that kind of clear headed like editor thing that I really need. Like that's the part I really need help with in a lot of my writing.
All right. Anyone else have any questions, comments?
So joining Matt and Ryan.
My joke question is, can you repeat the reading for me? But nice to meet you a little bit more, Levi. People
Yeah,
that don't
thanks.
know, Levi and I are Atmosphere Press friends sort of now. And we've seen pictures of each other, and your book is coming in the mail, but we've never really spoken. So I'm sorry I wasn't here on time.
But you live next door to Utah.
Yeah, we just
Idaho.
were there in Moab, and I tasted your coffee, and it was very good.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I wasn't even full of it. It was actually the best cup of coffee I've had in a long time.
Oh, good.
Maybe I should get out more. Maybe pandemic should stop happening or something.
Yeah.
Terry Rogers asked, do you envision yourself writing a novel about another state? Be like a Suf John Stevens of the novel
Ooh,
writing world and do one for
I
every
did
state?
think of that. Actually, I do want to write a novel eventually about each state I've lived in.
Cool.
Because I'm too lazy to do research, so it's just easier if you know the place. So that would be for me. It'd be next two would be Colorado and Oregon.
All right. Trilogy.
Yeah, trilogy. But yeah, it's yeah, I've definitely thought of that. I don't think I could do all 50 like Sufjan. I mean,
He can't either, apparently. So.
No. But I really like regional stuff. I don't know what it is. But I just enjoy like getting to know a place and then trying to like explain to other people like the kind of vibe of that, like what is, you know, what that place is like. And I like you know, it's like I was talking about earlier, like there's a lot of preconceptions about Utah as a state, but then like I do it myself. I say this because a lot of my wife's family's here. My wife's from Ventura area, and I would always be like, oh, Southern California. It's just like Huntington Beach and Beverly Hills. Like that was my vision, right? But then you get there and it's like so much, like each place is like different, right? Each neighborhood and each little thing is different. And so I enjoy kind of trying to figure out a place as a whole, or trying to like write about it. I mean, that's why I love, you know, like Anthony Bourdain's show was one of my favorites, just him going to a new place and like going through it and describing it, and then trying to write about some of those lesser known places too, like Utah, where I feel like in some ways the right, it seems like all the big movies now, everything's set in like New York or LA or like blah blah blah. And so it's like nice to get out and see like an indie flick or read something else where it's like some town in the Midwest or West you've never heard of, and kind of get that, you know, get that story.
Cool. Well, for Matt and everyone, we're recording this and I'm going to put it up on our YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon sometime. So you can catch up, you guys who showed up late, and see the entire thing recorded there, or tell friends to go and watch it there. Thank you everyone for showing up and asking such great questions. Our author here.
Do we have time for Derek's question? I'm curious what you're going to ask, Derek. I don't know, maybe we don't, but.
Oh, Derek has a question? I'm sorry.
I saw Derek's hand.
Oh, do it, Derek.
Hi, I'm Derek. I'm also a writer. I really loved your reading. Your sense of place is amazing. There were a lot of lines I really loved. I had a question. I mostly write poetry, and I'm trying to get into writing stories. And I'm just curious where you started with this one. I recently started a story, and I had to start with the end. And I'm just curious what point in the story you started, or where your characters began for you.
Oh yeah, that's good. I started in poetry too. My journey is kind of weird. It's like I started in poetry, and then I did creative nonfiction, and then now I do fiction stuff. But I actually started because I wanted to. I don't know why this. I think it kind of hurt me in the long run. I wish I would have outlined it a little better. But like I like just starting with characters and like a scene, and then just trying to build from nothing in some ways. But it would have saved me a lot of work and trouble if I would have known the ending first, or like how to, where it was going. But then that's kind of the fun part about writing too, is just like, and every piece is different, it's almost like a mystical thing you're trying to figure out, like, right? It's like you create it, but then it's also like the piece is its own thing in some ways that you're trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, what kind of thing are you in the same way?
Matt had a good question here. How much did your novel change from when you submitted to Atmosphere Press to the final version we're about to read? Can you talk about that process?
Yeah, that was, I was really interested in this aspect of it because, right, I've never written a book, and so like I didn't ever know how, right, like you write a book, but then there's a big long process of like how that, right, manuscript then becomes like a book, right? And that was, I think, the part of the project, of this whole project, that I think I learned the most in, is like what goes into that, all that. So it didn't really change. It didn't change a lot. What I really needed to do was to really just finesse, like, and really get perfectionistic on all the little things, and clean up all the things, and like omit tiny things that didn't help it, and just really kind of like, I feel like everything was there. It was just getting it to the sort of bare bones, and so it didn't change a lot. And I also think that's part of Atmosphere's things. They're not going to tell you like, oh well, you should do this or you should do this. Like, they kind of want you to do your thing. But yeah, it was an interesting process, and it's kind of nice just to like write something and then like show it to someone, like an editor, like, and then have them be like, yeah, this makes sense. And then just say like, yeah, just tighten up like these few things. That is the hardest process for me, though, is like I could write a book pretty fast, like that 90% of the book I feel like I could write. I create content pretty fast, but then it's like that last 10% that I'm just like, I don't know like how to like get this from something like good to like polished and clean, and like that really stands out. I think that's the hardest part for me, is like I'm working on a memoir right now too, and I'm just like, I have like 80% of the content, but then it's like figuring out, all right, what shape and structure is all this stuff gonna go in? So, and it's so frustrating because it just keeps me up at night, and I just think about it all the time. Like, what am I gonna do with this? But yeah, good question.
Do we have any others before we say goodnight? All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Really great reading. Congratulations, Levi.
Thank you all so much. It's so good to see everyone. This is so fun.
Congratulations.
Congrats. It's so great.
And thank you
Yeah,
all. You all helped
congratulations.
me in some way or another.
Love you.
All right.
Love
Good
you
night,
guys.
everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Yep. Thanks again to Michael and Annie Blooms as well.
Bye, Levi.
Bye.
Bye again.